October 1945. A low autumn sun hangs over the repatriation docks at Kagoshima, southern Japan. The air is thick with diesel smoke and the sour smell of unwashed bodies. Hundreds of Imperial Japanese Navy nurses, still in their faded white uniforms now gray with Pacific grime, stand in ragged lines aboard the U.S. hospital ship Benevolence. Their faces are gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath skin burnt dark by years on coral islands. Many have not eaten rice in weeks, only weevil-infested hardtack and rainwater. A young American Red Cross worker, blonde hair tucked beneath her cap, moves down the line, handing each woman a small paper packet. Inside is a single glossy sheet, a color photograph torn from the July 1945 issue of Life magazine. The image shows the produce aisle of an A&P supermarket in Des Moines, Iowa. Oranges the size of softballs, pyramids of shining apples, bananas hanging in golden clusters, lettuce so green it seems to glow from within. The nurses take the photographs without a word, at first believing them to be propaganda tricks, painted fakes. Then one, Lieutenant Kieko Yamada of the Yokosuka Naval Hospital, lifts the picture closer to her eyes. Her cracked lips part. A sound escapes. Half sob, half gasp, and she sinks to her knees on the steel deck. Within moments, the weakened spreads down the line like wind through wheat. This moment, captured in silence by an American naval photographer and later buried in the National Archives, marks the exact instant when the myth of Yamato Damashi, the unbreakable Japanese spirit, collided with the reality of American industrial abundance. For 4 years, these women had been told that the enemy was starving, that the United States was a decadent nation of jazz and gangsters on the verge of collapse. Tokyo Rose herself had broadcast nightly that American mothers queued for hours for a single potato. Yet here, in living color no Japanese eye had ever witnessed, was proof of the lie. The photograph was not of a palace banquet or a general's table. It was of an ordinary neighborhood grocery open to any civilian with a few dollars. That democratic accessibility, more than the bombs or the fleet, wounded something deep in the Japanese soul. The nurses had expected captivity to be brutal. They had been trained to bite through cyanide capsules sewn into their collars rather than face American rape and torture. Instead, they were met by smiling corpsmen who offered Hershey bars and Coca-Cola. They had expected hunger to continue. Instead, they were served hot meals 3 times a day. Roast beef, mashed potatoes swimming in butter, canned peaches in heavy syrup, white bread thick enough to sink teeth into without pain. And now, these photographs. The contrast was unbearable. Petty Officer 3rd Class Reiko Tanaka later wrote in her repatriation diary, discovered decades later in a Fukuoka attic, "We were told we fought for the Emperor's divine land, where 1 bowl of rice and the sea's bounty were enough for honor. But these Americans throw away more food in a day than our village saw in a year. I am ashamed, not of defeat, but of the smallness of everything we were asked to die for." Official U.S. Navy medical records from the Benevolence list 47 separate incidents of acute emotional collapse among the 312 Japanese nurses processed between 11 and 14 October. Doctors diagnosed psychological shock induced by visual evidence of enemy material superiority. Translation: the sight of abundant food, in full color, shattered the last ideological pillar holding their world together. One Navy surgeon noted that several nurses instinctively tried to eat the photographs, pressing the glossy paper to their mouths as if the apples might yield juice. The recurring image that haunts every frame of this story is the orange. In the Imperial Navy, citrus was reserved for officers and the seriously ill. Ordinary seamen saw an orange perhaps once every 2 years. On starved garrisons like Tarawa and Saipan, men died of scurvy, with gums bleeding black. Yet in the American photograph, the oranges are stacked 20 high, waxed to a planetary shine, priced at $6 for a quarter. To the nurses, That orange became a burning symbol, not merely of food, but of a society that could produce so much surplus that even the poorest citizen might taste sweetness whenever he wished. It was the physical proof of a different social contract, a nation that fed its people first and asked questions later. In the hold of the benevolence, nurses passed the photographs hand to hand, tracing the curve of each orange with trembling fingers as medieval pilgrims once touched relics. Something profound shifted in those days. Women who had been prepared to die without hesitation now wept openly at the thought that children in Iowa tossed half-eaten apples into rubbish bins. Lieutenant Yamada, the first to fall to her knees, would later train as a dietitian in post-war Tokyo and devote her life to school lunch programs, telling her students, "Never forget the color of that orange. It was the color of a world that refused to let its people go hungry." Others burned their wartime diaries, unable to reconcile the rhetoric of holy war with the evidence of their own eyes. The empire had promised spiritual superiority. America delivered oranges by the crate. In the end, the photographs did more than any courtroom in Tokyo to convict the old order. Long after the trials, long after the speeches about democracy and reconstruction, it was the memory of those impossible fruits that lingered. The nurses carried the images home in their few allowed possessions, hidden inside hymnals or sewn into the linings of coats. In quiet kitchens across a shattered nation, they laid the glossy pages on tatami mats and stared at them by candlelight while their own children slept on empty stomachs. The orange, round and blazing, became the silent witness to a larger truth. No ideology, however fierce, can withstand the quiet power of a society that feeds its people abundantly and calls that abundance ordinary. Years later, when Japan itself filled supermarkets with towering pyramids of fruit and the children of those same nurses took oranges for granted, a few of the old women would still pause in the produce aisle, eyes misting. They had seen the future once, in the autumn of 1945, on the deck of an American hospital ship. And though it broke them at first, it also, in the strangest of mercies, began their healing. The color photograph had not lied. The world could be this generous. Freedom, it turned out, tasted like citrus on an empty tongue.